participating for today's session. On behalf of Eco India, I welcome you all to today's session. In the midst of this ongoing pandemic, we are witnessing a plethora of information available to us, both fact and myth. Eco India has been instrumental towards building capacity and bringing in information to easy access in the area of healthcare and education. Eco India, along with SBI Foundation, is running COVID-19 educational series by inviting national experts to speak on various topics from across the country with an objective to help reach everyone with correct information. I would like to invite Dr. Sandeep Bhalla, Associate Vice President at Eco India, to formally start the session. Over to you, Dr. Bhalla.
Thank you, Deepa. Very good evening to all the medical colleagues, healthcare professionals, those who have joined today again in our educational series, which is the 13th series of Eco India, which we have started keeping in mind dissemination of the right knowledge to the right people at the right places. As we are moving ahead, before I should introduce to the topic and the leader who is going to take the topic today, I would just want to give you some statistics. And before that also, I would like to say big thank to SBI Foundation for supporting us and giving us this opportunity to run this particular series. Daily COVID-19 cases registering a constant decline, as we are all seeing. It seems the deadly second wave of COVID in India is receding now. India reported 94,000 new coronavirus infections in the last 24 hours. And with this, the cumulative count of the cases has now gone up to 2,91,83,000. Although the cases are declining, the death rate continues to remain high. And you can see that a total of 6,148 fatalities being reported in a span of 24 hours. And the number of the people who have recuperated from the disease has climbed to 2.76 lakhs, while the case fatality rate was recorded at 1.23%. The aim of this educational webinar series is to address the concerns in the prevention, transmission, clinical management, protocol management, home care, vaccination preparedness, awareness, general awareness, myths, and the misinformations which people are having. We should try to address those things also. Keeping all this mind up, you have seen that during this pandemic which COVID has created, antibiotics have played a significant role in advancing the field of medicine. However, a continuous usage of antibiotics poses a considerable threat and is a public health concern. The COVID-19 pandemic has put enormous strain on the health sector. Using the correct antimicrobials at the right time, in the right dose, and for the right duration has been the hallmark of antimicrobial stewardship programs. Due to the current pandemic, following the antimicrobial stewardship guidelines become difficult to follow. There are two reasons for COVID-19 patients to receive the antibiotics. First, the chance of getting of co-infection while admitted to the hospital, and second, the symptoms of COVID-19 resemble bacterial pneumonia. So antibiotic coverage for the patient admitted to the wards and intensive care units may help in decreasing the chances of getting co-infections. India has a high rate of prescriptions of antibiotics for COVID-19 patients. Mild patients are treated with macrolides and quinolones, and the patients who had community-acquired COVID-19 received carbamazepines and beta-lactams also. In this context, today, the topic of the webinar is COVID-19 in our educational series is antibiotics and misuse in COVID-19. And we have with us none other than but very eminent speaker, Dr. Sangeeta Sharma, madam. Dr. Sangeeta Sharma, madam, is presently a professor and head of neuropsychopharmacology at Institute of Human Behavior and Allied Sciences, Delhi. She is also the honorary president of Delhi Society for Promotion of Rational Use of Drugs, that is DSPRUD. And ECO is kind enough, and we are lucky to have a partnership with DSPRUD also, actively working in the forefront of promoting rational use of drugs, special focus on antimicrobial use, medication safety, quality in healthcare, rich and diversified professional managerial experience in healthcare. She has conducted more than 200 workshops to build capacity for doctors, nurses, and pharmacists. She has written various books, and one of her pioneer work in the book is Standard Treatment Guidelines and Manual for Medical Therapeutics. And we are very happy to announce that she is going to start this particular thing along with ECO very soon in the month of July, and particularly series based on this particular book itself. She's a nodal officer for antimicrobial resistance containment, Delhi State Government also. With you, I think I'll not take more time, and I will hand it over to my own leader in the antimicrobial stewardship, none other than but Dr. Sangeeta Sharma Madam, to take us to the journey of this particular myths and the misconceptions which antibiotics have created, and a lot of issues which mucormycosis has come up in a big way, and people are saying it's the overusage of antibiotics, overusage of zinc. Some people are saying overusage of other medications which has created this issue. So over to you, Madam. All the best and take care. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sandeep Bhalla, for such a kind introduction. And you have already set the ground for the lecture today. The problem of antibiotic use, why is it so important besides this black fungus epidemic, which is twin problem which has come up with the second wave of COVID. This topic has ever become even more important to discuss. Can I start sharing my screen? Yes. Can you see my screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. We all know that a lot of antibiotics are being used during this time, and we are facing a dual health threat. Double problem hai. One problem is that we have antimicrobial resistance, and we are already in the midst of COVID pandemic. So why do you think that these antimicrobials are important? These are the greatest discovery of this century. They are the life-saving medicine, and the discovery of penicillin in 1940 changed the practice of modern medicine. We were whatever all our achievements today in modern medicine, be it complicated surgeries, be it cancer treatment, be it transplantation, all these achievements are because of antibiotics, because we have been able to save these patients from infections. But the problem is that this golden era of antimicrobials will be soon over due to development of resistance. And while giving the Nobel Prize speech, Alexander Fleming in 1945 itself gave a cautionary statement to this effect of problem of developing antimicrobial resistance. And because these germs, they also need to survive in this universe, and they very soon develop these mechanisms to overcome these antimicrobial to survive this. And he observed this phenomena at that time when he discovered this penicillin. And but he also cautioned at that time itself there will be a time when these antimicrobials will be used, misused, overused, and maybe there would be a day when these antimicrobials will stop functioning. So this, what do you mean by antimicrobial resistance? Antimicrobial, this is the resistance to antibiotics that treat infections caused by microbes. Earlier we were using this term antibiotic resistance, but now we realize that even viruses, fungi also develop this mechanisms to resist these antimicrobials. So now nowadays we use this term antimicrobial resistance, and this is a natural biological phenomena. Microbes need to evolve to develop resistance to these drugs as they are exposed to them. So but what is happening is that human action is making it worse. When it is a biological phenomena, the speed of developing resistance is slow. But a lot of our actions, like it is not only that these antimicrobials are used by human beings only, they are used, misused, overused in animal sector also, to the extent that 80% of the bulk of antimicrobial produce is used in the animal sector. So that's where it is adding to the resistance problem, because from the excreta of these animals, the antimicrobials are getting into our environment and then coming back to us, and that's how this problem of antimicrobial resistance is becoming bigger. And also over the years, with the advent of these antimicrobials, somehow over the years we have relied more on these antimicrobials and use this as a shortcut for infection prevention and control practices. So poor sanitary conditions promote development of these resistance, because these patients then need more of these antibiotics. And in appropriate food handling, poor infection prevention and control practices in hospitals, they all add and make this problem of AMR worse. What happens is, if you look at the prescriptions in outdoor department, 90% of the prescriptions would have some one antibiotic or the other. Sometimes I see two or three antibiotics being prescribed. That leaves us a question, are all patients which we see in outdoor department, are they all suffering from some infectious disease? I think you would agree, not all of them suffer from infectious disease. There are other patients with diabetes, hypertension, malaria, other epilepsy, but most often we find that antibiotics are prescribed. When you come to the indoor department, patients admitted in the hospital, nearly again half of the patients will get some antibiotic, and these antibiotics are being used, overused for trivial viral infections, which we know antibiotics do not work on viruses, but still we use this. And whenever sometimes when we need for some bacterial infection, the choice of antibiotic is also inappropriate. We choose a broad spectrum antibiotic rather than a narrow spectrum antibiotic. Sometimes duration of treatment with these antibiotics is not adequate. Either patients are given too long a course of antimicrobial, or they will stop these medicines on their own once they start feeling better. And many a times these antibiotics, even if prescribed are not in accordance with the clinical guidelines. And as I said, inappropriate self medication adds fuel to this problem of AMR. Patients like to get these medicines over the counter, and the pharmacist not being aware of what is the right way of using these antibiotics. These are heavily dispensed over the counter. So all these things problem add to development and spread of AMR. Now next, the dilemma which the clinicians face, the frontline doctors face, they are unable to distinguish between bacteria and viral infections. uh, Fever is the sign, in both the virus infection as well as in the bacterial infection. So because of this, overuse of this antibiotic happens in almost 50%. And at the same time, irrational use is not only the overuse of these antibiotics, but underuse of these antibiotics is equally a problem. It has been observed that 20% of the patients who need these antibiotics, they don't get these antibiotics in a timely manner. So the consequences again, that they suffer for a longer time, they have complications, the infection spreads in the body, and they need to be hospitalized. So there is a excess over excess paradox. On one hand, we are not able to provide these antibiotics to those who are in need of these antibiotics, and on the other end, where these antibiotics are available, they are being used excessively. So this paradox is making the problem worse. And and this is not only a problem in India, this is a global problem. This is a major public health issue these days, and even in developed world where there are many guidelines in force, but still they get have this problem of overuse of these antibiotics. Now in this time, at these times when we have a raging COVID pandemic going on, we have a dual health threat. हमारी problem double हो गई है. If you consider COVID-19 pandemic, I like saying that this is like it struck us like a tsunami. We were not ready for it. We didn't know what is this pathogen is, how does it enter, where all it goes and affects in the body, how the immune response to this pathogen is there, what is the treatment for this. So we were all desperate, when this COVID-19 struck us in early 2020. So we were not prepared for it, and a lot of deaths have occurred because of this first wave. Not many deaths happened in India, but globally a lot of deaths have happened. In India, when we had the second wave of COVID, more than 4 lakh people died because of this COVID. But I would like to say this problem of antimicrobial resistance is as catastrophic as COVID-19. Although we cannot see this is a slow pandemic or a silent pandemic facing. If you look at the number of deaths caused by this AMR is 7 lakh people have already died because of this, and it is projected that the 10 million people will die because of the antimicrobial problem of this antimicrobial resistance. And this would be much more than the COVID deaths. And by 2050, it will, it is not only the deaths which we are concerned. It has its impact on economy as well, and it will be more than 100 trillion. Cost of this AMR would be more than $100 trillion, and this would amount to about 3.5% of the global GDP, which is a big economic impact. Today, because of the lockdowns, we are talking about the economy for COVID, but we are heading towards a time when antimicrobial resistance will develop to such an extent that we will not have antimicrobials to treat simple infections which we are able to treat these now. So that's how this becomes a dual health threat at this time. The consequences, of course, as you know, if the patient is infected with antimicrobial resistant pathogens, microbes, patients are ill for a longer duration, increased hospital acquired infections would be there, higher cost, treatment cost is there, and this higher cost is because of the expensive drugs. Higher end antibiotics are required to handle this AMR, and this of course will have an increased burden on the health system. COVID has shown us how we crumbled under this second wave of COVID. Our whole healthcare infrastructure fell down because of the second wave. So we already have a weak health structure, and AMR will further add to the burden on the health system. Now earlier infections were sensitive, infections were being spread. Tuberculosis was always sensitive to first line anti-tubercular drugs, but then because of the misuse of anti-tubercular drug, people not completing the course with tuberculosis, then multi-drug resistant TB was reported, and then XDR TB. Then nowadays I was reading totally resistant TB is being reported. So what happens is, because of this, that patients act as a reservoir of resistant organisms for the community. So earlier, when TB, when it was sensitive to first line anti-tubercular drugs, so patient also, the community also got this community sensitive tuberculosis infection. But now with this MDR, XDR, and totally resistant TB, what do we expect? This XDR TB will spread in the community, and this will add to treatment failures and high mortality. And let me also tell you, if you look at the entire budget of a hospital, around 20 to 25% of the budget goes for the purchase of antimicrobials, and some hospitals, it is 30 to 50% of the hospital pharmacy budget goes into antimicrobials. So now what has happened, because of use of these antibiotics in COVID-19, um, let's understand how this happens. There are certain studies which have reported that early antibiotic therapy was given for COVID-19 patient, and around 80 to 90% of these patients got these antibiotics. And only out of these around 80-90% of the patient, only 7% of the COVID patients were found to have bacterial co-infections or secondary infections. So that is the extent of the discrepancy between the use of antibiotics and the COVID. Most often in COVID patients, these antibiotics are used because of the fear that the patient may be having co-infection with other bacteria, or during the course of COVID, patient may have some secondary infection or super infection, and that is why antibiotics are needed. I will go through that later in my presentation. Right now, I'm just presenting you to, the data about the extent of antibiotic use in COVID-19. Now, there were other studies in CDC, has reported that 80% of the patient with community acquired pneumonia got antibiotics. Urinary patient 77, 47 were prescribed fluoroquinolones, and 27% of the patients received intravenous vancomycin therapy. So there is a lot of scope for improving the antibiotic prescribing in along with the COVID. And a lot of these was not supported by the the laboratory results or the clinical features. So just because we in early 20 when this COVID-19 pandemic started, at that time we didn't have the much idea about the presentations. But now, after 1.5 years of having experience of handling this pandemic, now we know that what is the extent of co-infection and what is the extent of super infection in COVID patients. So again, another study, uh, too many this study was reported from Michigan University, and they said too many COVID-19 patients got unneeded just in case antibiotics. They knew early pandemic, because diagnostics were not was readily available. So just in case patient may have a bacterial infection, antibiotics were used. But now, after having 1.5 years of experience, just in case antibiotics use is not uh, justified. So that is why and these antibiotics were used because diagnostics testing was limited, empirically were used. And some of the inflammatory markers which can help us in distinguishing between bacterial and viral infections, those tests were not available or affordable. So lot of these things contributed to this. And now in this study, they have reported clearly, that co-infection on presentation, where a patient when started having fever, co-infection with other bacteria was found only in 3.5%. So using it to the extent of 80-90% is clearly unjustified. Similarly, 14 point, some studies mostly were around 15% to 20% secondary infections were reported. And when they looked at the antibiotic prescribing, almost 70% of these patients got antibiotics, empirical antibiotics for this. Now, one thing very important here is that the most vulnerable patients who are vulnerable to COVID-19 are also most vulnerable to this drug resistant infections. So, that makes this dual threat even more bigger, because people over the age of 65, those who have compromised immune system, have, they are undergoing transplant, or they are undergoing cancer treatment, or they may be having other comorbidities, diabetes, hypertension, COPD. All these things make these patients more vulnerable to drug resistant infections as well. Now, if you look at what is the proportion of this vulnerable population in India, 75% of elderly in India, they suffer from some chronic disease. This study has shown that. So our proportion is 75% of our elderly are vulnerable to these both COVID-19 and drug resistant infections. And in India, these chronic diseases account for 53% of all deaths. This is 2005 data, and I don't know, I couldn't find latest figures on this, but certainly it would be around this, or maybe more number of chronic diseases are being repeated. Now, also there are many meta-analysis studies been done. WHO also has come up with some data on this. Again, all of these are pointing towards high use of antibiotics, and whereas only super infections or co-infections were reportedly not that many. And also there were a lot of use of, in early COVID-19, azithromycin was used because it had some immunomodulating effect, and hydrochloroquine was used. But again, use of these drugs was not recommended outside of clinical trials for COVID-19. So I think figures are more or less similar. I can pass. Now let's look at what is the position in India. A few days back there was a lot of news about this in the Indian media. Antibiotics, the report, they had a very catchy heading here, that the antibiotics used in COVID patients is worsening the India's superbug plight. And when I went through the study findings, it was really very worrying, pointing towards a worrying situation. Although this is 2020, this study data was collected from the AMR surveillance sites, and what was the extent of the secondary infections in hospitalized COVID-19 patients. Overall secondary infection was 3.6%, but secondary infection in hospitalized, those who were hospitalized with COVID-19, it was 20%, much little more than what is reported globally. And all these infections were reported, about 78% were seen after 48 hours of admission. That means it becomes, most of these infections were healthcare associated infections. And again, this was higher than the community acquired infections. And the pathogens which were identified from these patients, they were predominantly of gram-negative pathogens and isolates for fungal pathogens were found, and these patients had higher mortality rate, and overall mortality was 11.6%, but these patients who developed this secondary infection had 56% mortality. And also, although these patients had some comorbidities, but still these figures are high. And if you come look at the pathogens which were found in this study, the majority, these were multi-drug resistant bacteria, gram negative bacteria, Klebsiella and Acinetobacter. So and the one thing very peculiar, which is concerned over here, is that these demonstrated a very high carbapenem resistance, 72% and 92% respectively. So if you have the extent of resistance of 70% and 90%, this is quite worrying. Now, if you then they looked at the kind of antimicrobials prescribed, and they found that mostly antibiotics used in these hospitalized patients were from watch and reserve categories, and piperacillin medicines like piperacillin, cefoperazone, sulbactam, carbapenems, vancomycin was used for this. Now, these are the drugs of almost last resort. We don't have better antibiotics at present, and if resistance is to this extent, we need to reconsider this. Now, another finding they found in these sites was that Candida species was also isolated, 9% of the blood culture samples, and this also in more than 30% resistance to fluconazole was reported. And out of these, 10% patients received antifungals without any evidence of fungal infection. So this mucor mycosis, which we see right now, and if resistance develops to these antifungals, then the problem would be quite worrying. Now, another reason for antimicrobial resistance is disruption of health services during this pandemic. A lot of people who were suffering from tuberculosis, who were on ART for AIDS treatment, they, because of the lockdowns, there was an interruption in their treatments. They couldn't go and get their medicines. So this is another setting where selection for drug resistance is seen. Similarly, disruption of vaccination was also seen. The children could not be taken for vaccination. So, and this can increase the risk of infection, potentially leading to an overuse of antimicrobials. So this is another aspect with which we need to look at this. Now, for this, managing this dual health threat, we need to balance this critical co-infections and limiting the global burden of morbidity, mortality during this COVID-19 pandemic and beyond. Now, we are almost at the facing the end of golden antibiotic era. Ever since the penicillin was discovered, a lot of new antibiotic classes were discovered, and we kept having new antibiotics coming in, and we never thought there is any problem of this antimicrobial resistance, because every time we got a new antibiotic to overcome the problem. Now, but problem days is that antibiotic development is dwindling. Pharmaceutical industry is not interested in discovering new antimicrobials, because they don't get enough return on investment. Development of antimicrobial, bringing to marketing stage, is a long drawn time intensive method. Lot of money, billions of dollars are involved, and very soon, once these antibiotics are introduced into the market, there's this problem of, because of the misuse of these antibiotics, within 6 months to 1 year, resistance is reported. So they are not interested. And whatever we have, you may be saying, we keep having some new antibiotics. How are you saying that for last 20 years we haven't had a new antibiotic class? The whatever we have is generations, first generation cephalosporin, second generation, third generation, fourth generation, but no new class. The difference is the earlier one could be given, was given parentally, but now you can give orally as well. Or their spectrum is little bit enhanced, but no new class is coming. So we are facing the end of this golden antibiotic era. And this is because, and this is leading to AMR is increasing, while development of newer antimicrobials is decreasing. So we are left with one option, that we need to preserve the antibiotics which are available today with us. So we need to prolong their life by rational use of these antibiotics. So now my next part, I would try to deal with, how can we handle this dual problem? How can we fight COVID-19 and AMR together? One of the best way of fighting is that we improve our diagnostics. We unnecessary lot of antibiotics are used unnecessarily, because there is confusion about the diagnosis, whether it is viral, bacteria, which all these things. If we have a proper point of care diagnostics available, this can help us solve the problem of unnecessary antibiotic use. And this we have seen, earlier a lot of antibiotic was used in mild patients as well, but with shorter turnaround times for COVID testing, very soon, even by the end of the day or next day, RT-PCR report is now available. Even this rapid antigen test, RAT, is result is available within 15-20 minutes. So this helps us confirm that whether this is COVID-19 or any other bacterial infection. So, and then there are other inflammatory markers which can help us differentiate between viral and bacterial infections. So that will help us in determining what is the best course of treatment for this patient. Lastly, third is this, because of these diagnostic, clinical, laboratory features and all that, we can make informed decisions about when can you safely discontinue these antibiotics. You may have started antibiotic, patient came to you, he looked sick, and you felt that there was a need for prescribing antibiotic, but with these diagnostics available, you can always discontinue these antibiotics at the earliest. Now, another way of fighting these two problems is COVID-19 and AMR is with vaccines. So with vaccines, this will reduce not only COVID-19 infections, but other vaccine preventable infectious diseases also can be prevented, and this will reduce the potential for unnecessary antibiotic use, and this will reduce the likelihood of spreading drug resistance in the community. Now, coming to the greater part of it, public policy also has a very great role to play here. We need to increase the clinical competence amongst health workers, how to treat these COVID-19 patients through targeted training. So 5 key competency areas have been identified. The healthcare workers must know and identify signs and symptoms of severe COVID-19 and that of superimposed bacterial or fungal disease. If we know this, what is moderate, what is mild, what is severe, and how would this superimposed bacterial or fungal disease look like, then it will help us in optimizing the use of antibiotic. And even when you were not sure, or these diagnostics were not available, antibiotics are prescribed, but one can do a daily review for de-escalation. You have started with a broad spectrum antibiotic, and then you switch to a narrow spectrum once the blood culture reports are available, this respiratory culture is available, or urine culture report is available. So one need to review this to de-escalate. And then many of these super added or secondary infections, super infections, happen because of the need for medical devices, like catheters, and others, intubation, amongst those who are admitted with COVID-19. So we need to evaluate the need for medical devices and others that increase the chances of healthcare associated infections and thereby antibiotic use. And of course, strict IPC, prevention is better than cure. We need to implement IPC measures strictly in the health facility. Then by ensuring the continuity of essential health services and regular supply of good quality antimicrobials, including for those TB and AIDS and vaccine. This is very important. What happened during lockdowns, most of the hospitals were converted into COVID hospitals, but this hampered, and a lot of deaths happened because they didn't have the access to essential health services. Many people with the chronic comorbidities, they couldn't access this. Many cancer patients went into relapses, and cancer spread and they died because of this. So when we need to look into review this, whether how can we provide uh, continuous essential health services to non-COVID patients as well. And by reducing the turnaround time for COVID-19 testing, by improving the testing methods, the sampling sites, or expanding the testing facilities, this will help us. Then another very important question is use of biocides for environmental and personal disinfection. There should be, this should be used with caution. This may also propagate resistance in these pathogens. And of course, research is needed. Today we were having a meeting and we were discussing this. We have so much of data available with us now. We have this 1.5 years, with COVID-19. We should use this artificial intelligence and give projections, why and who is getting this COVID-19, and who are the patients who got vaccines and they got breakthrough COVID-19. So research has a very important role, and this needs to be continuously published as well. Now, there are two major components in the public policy which can be done at the hospital level, at the clinician level, which will help us in solving this problem of antimicrobial resistance. One of them is the antimicrobial stewardship program. And then the second important backbone of this antimicrobial stewardship program is adherence to the treatment guidelines. A lot of guidance is coming from ministry from time to time. The professional associations are also giving guidance on how to manage COVID-19 in pediatric patients, in pregnancy, how to manage diabetes. So a lot of guidance is coming. So it is important that that we need to adhere to these guidelines. Otherwise, NCDC has developed some guidelines. We have also been from DSP RUD for last 20 years publishing these standard treatment guidelines every 2 to 3 years, updating it. So whatever is accessible, but now in this COVID time, we need to adhere to the guidance from the ministry from time to time and ICMR. Now, let's go into little deep into the what is antimicrobial stewardship and how does it help us in fighting this problem. The major these are interventions which help us to improve and measure appropriate use of antibiotics. It helps promoting the selection of right antibiotic regimen for this, right dose, duration, route, etc. But to me, I call there are two parts to this antimicrobial stewardship. One is you are reducing the use of antibiotics, reduction of antibiotic use. The other is prevention of spread of infections in the hospital. So it's a marriage between antibiotic use policy and the infection prevention and control. No matter if you have a good policy, antibiotic policy, and IPC measures are not in place, this is not going to help. Or if you have a good IPC measures, nowadays many people, now we are sensitive towards this, and we are taking it seriously. But if you have this in place, but antibiotics are being used indiscriminately, then the problem will not be solved. So antibiotic stewardship would be at the institutional level, would be the major intervention which is required. So it will help if we have a good stewardship program in place. It will help us in reducing the resistance by ensuring use of antibiotics by all providers, and then optimize patient safety by using right drug, dose, duration, and de-escalate at the right time. See, what happens is most often in all our wisdom, we do start with antibiotics, keeping the patient's condition in mind. No problem with that, but we need to make, we fail to de-escalate. We start with full throttle antibiotics, but we fail to de-escalate at the right time. So that's what is needed in the antibiotic stewardship. And for this stewardship program, you need to have a rule book in place, or a written guidance in place, which will recommend which antibiotics, where, in which patient care area, when will you use, for how long can you use. And this is in an effort to, we want to chase this, germs are riding on this bike, and we need to chase this, because time and again it has proven that germs are smarter than us. They have always remained ahead of us, no matter what and how many antibiotics we have. Time and again it has shown, you developed a new antibiotic, and the pathogen, the germs, microbes developed some resistance, so they will always remain ahead of us. We need to try to catch this. So the aim is to reduce morbidity, mortality, and preserve, the most important, I think, if we can preserve the effectiveness of the available antimicrobials for this treatment. Otherwise, that time is not very far away that we will be helpless, like in COVID-19, that we will not have antibiotics to treat simple infections, sore throats, UTI, like this, because they will all become resistant and prevent the spread of communicable diseases. Now, how do you select these antibiotics? Let me spend a moment on this. Uh, it acts on wide class of pathogens, broad spectrums, they act on wide class of pathogens, so they kill all these bacteria. Narrow spectrum, they act on the single this thing. So chances of developing resistance are more when you use broad spectrum, because then the normal flora is also disturbed. So that is why we always say broad spectrum antibiotics should not be used indiscriminately. So and also there are bactericidal drugs and bactericidal drugs. Bactericidal antibiotics, they kill the bacteria, whereas static drugs, they just limit the multiplication of these bacteria. So you need to use these carefully. When do you need bacteriostatic or a cidal drug? Now, coming to the spectrum of COVID-19, when to use these antibiotics in the management of COVID-19. As you know, the spectrum of COVID-19 is quite wide, from asymptomatic infection to symptomatic infection. Mild, majority although are mild infections, but some around 20% have moderate, and then few land up in ICUs because of the severe COVID-19. Usually severe COVID seen in patients who are high risk patients who have multiple comorbidities. So green ones, you see mild, they will recover on this. and because they have a protective immunity. But immune dysregulation is seen in severe and moderately severe patient, and which can lead to death of the patient. Most importantly, that this COVID-19 cytokine storm, lot of inflammation is produced, and they lead to these symptoms, and organ damage and coagulopathy and multi-organ system dysfunction. Now, we also now know that there are three phases of COVID: acute COVID, which I described to you just now, then followed by post-acute COVID, which last usually, now we see that around 2 to 3 months it is taking after the patient is recovering from acute COVID. So this post acute COVID is lasting for 3 months. Now we also see that there are patients who continue to have these some of these symptoms beyond 3 months. So this is being called long COVID. So now what happens is, acute COVID, misuse happens, when at the start of this acute COVID, on the onset of illness, if antibiotics are used for mild illness or asymptomatic patients, and then there is a cytokine storm, this is which is a stage 2 pulmonary phase, and there is hyperinflammation phase. The fever, initial fever will be there for 4 or 5 days when the virus is replicating. Then maybe the patient recovers, and then he again has recrudescence of fever, because this fever is not because of the bacterial infection. This is because of the hyperinflammation phase. So this is the time when most of us mistake this for a bacterial infection and start giving the antibiotics. Now usually, cytokine storm is giving rise to fever and other symptoms, and it is patient is admitted because of the cytokine storm and difficulty in breathing, etc. So sorry, breathing problem, unless it becomes severe problem in breathing or in immunosuppressed patients, antibiotics are not needed. Most of it will get better by if you manage this cytokine storm properly with steroids and other drugs. Patient needs supportive care at this time. Now coming to what are the different types of co-infections which can be found in these patients. Many times this viruses, other influenza virus, para-influenza virus, RSV, these viruses can co-infect the patient. Co-infecting bacteria could be Acinetobacter, Klebsiella, Legionella, these are, and fungi, majority of the time Aspergillus, Candida species, they can co-infect these COVID patients. Now, this problem of this co-infection is that this makes the diagnosis difficult, treatment is difficult, and increases the patient's symptoms and mortality. And all what we need is targeted isolation and correct antibiotic treatment for this. And there are indicators, inflammatory markers, which are now available, were heavily relied on during the second wave, which can help us in diagnosing which are the viral and help us in distinguishing it from bacterial and fungal infections. Now, timing of these infection is very important. How do you know that this is a initial illness COVID, or is it the co-infection? It could be community acquired when they come up with this bacterial infection at the time of reporting to the health facility, but this has been found only less than 5%. then it could be hospital acquired after 48 hours of a hospitalization. So most of the infections which we see are hospital acquired or ventilation associated infections in COVID. And usually these hospital acquired are seen 1 to 2 weeks after of hospitalization. And most common ones, co-infections, secondary infections which we see are pneumonia, bloodstream, and urine infections. So when do you think a super added or secondary bacterial infection has happened? When there is a new or change in the character of sputum, there is new recrudescence of fever after the cytokine storm is over and the patient starts getting fever again. That's the time you can think about that the perhaps patient has got a secondary bacterial infection. When there is an increasing demand after initial phase of improvement, new relevant imaging finding on X-ray, you find that there are signs of bacterial or viral pneumonia. And also, if you look at the markers here, if it is a bacterial infection, you will find neutrophilic leukocytosis. WBC count would be high, and predominantly neutrophils will be high. Whereas in COVID-19, it is leukopenia. The lymphocytes are less here. So in bacterial infections, you will find more of so therefore, keeping these things, this knowledge in mind, WHO in current clinical guidance, they say no antibiotic therapy for mild to moderate. They even go to the extent of saying moderate COVID-19, there is, if there are no signs of bacterial infection. Even the current guidance from the ministry has also removed antibiotics from the moderate COVID-19. And these empirical antibiotics should be reserved in severe COVID, in the absence, if you of microbiological, when you are not able to establish the diagnosis, biochemical or radiological markers are not clear, it should be limited to these conditions only. So when do you think of a bacterial co-infection? As I said, productive cough, severe depression, respiratory depression, immunosuppression, radiological findings suggestive of bacterial pneumonia. COVID-19, now we know ground glass opacities are a hallmark of this COVID-19. So you can distinguish between, I think you are all better than me, in reading these X-rays. So reserve these antibiotics only for critically ill patients, and draw appropriate samples, blood, respiratory culture, nasal swabs, and then only start with the empirical antibiotics. If none of these exist, there is no indication for using these empirical. If at all required, you use beta lactam, ceftriaxone group of antibiotics for, and atypical coverage should be limited only in critically ill patients, and anti-MRSA like vancomycin used to be used in only in critical illness or when there is a history of prior MRSA. And also, as I said, de-escalation, I'm repeating this all over again, de-escalation after 48 to 72 hours, reassessment should be there. And if cultures are negative, stop it, discontinue these antibiotics. And if cultures have been found to be positive, some pathogen is grown, then give a targeted antimicrobial therapy. So informed re-evaluation is very important. Look at the microbiological data, assess spectrum, check for adverse effect. Many of these antibiotics have adverse effect on kidney, liver function, and other problems, ADR. So COVID itself can damage kidney and other systems. So these drugs should not be, so optimal should be decided after a re-evaluation. Now, another issue with antibiotics is in antimicrobial stewardship, which we say is we should switch from intravenous to oral as early as possible. The traditional view is that the serious is equal to parenteral. Whenever the patient is serious, we have this notion that the only parenteral IV or IM antibiotics will help. This was earlier correct to the extent, because we didn't have the counter oral agent available, but now we have a lot of oral effective antibiotics available. For example, cefixime is there, linezolid is there. So it's not necessary that always we will give these antibiotics parenterally. So prefer oral, then IM and IV depending on the situations. And if even if we started with IV, if the patient is stable, eating well, and is able to absorb the medicine, oral option is available. So then switch to oral antibiotics as early as possible. Now, coming to the role of inflammatory markers in excluding bacterial co-infection in COVID. Now, two basic inflammatory markers like WBC count and CRP can be utilized. And if there is a at baseline, and if you see there is no absence of both elevated baseline WBC count and antibiotic related decrease in CRP, if you start earlier, this CRP and this count would be raised in both COVID and the bacterial infections. But if once you start with the antibiotics, the CRP should come down, the WBC count should come down. So but if you don't see these coming down, that means there is no bacterial co-infection, and then you can discontinue. PCT, procalcitonin, this is another inflammatory marker which can be used to distinguish between bacteria from some viral RTI. But the problem with this is availability, cost is the problem. But also, there are no studies where this has been systematically compared between bacterial pneumonia and COVID-19. But certainly other markers like prothrombin time, liver enzyme, CKMB, bilirubin, blood urea nitrogen, creatinine, myohemoglobin, if these are also raised, so this probably suggests that there is a multi-system function damage, and it could be because of secondary bacteremia. So antibiotics could be used in these settings. So you can wisely use these inflammatory markers. But in this second wave, I saw that people were using the entire battery of these inflammatory markers as a baseline. The most important basic are the WBC, CRP, and if there are clinical features suggestive, then you can go on for other inflammatory markers, interleukin, ferritin, D dimers. There are particular indications for this. These are expensive test, and these should be reserved for critically ill patients. And also, one single reading of these will not help you. You need to have a serial CRP reading or WBC. So if it is more than 75, certainly you can think of maybe there is some secondary infection and you can use it. But serial CRP would help you, and not all these should be used. All these inflammatory markers should be used indiscriminately. Like there is irrational use of antibiotics, there is also irrational use of these markers also. You must have realized during the second wave, even the laboratories, they were exhausted, they didn't have supplies. So because everybody asked for these inflammatory markers indiscriminately. So for this stewardship approaches, I already told you that you have a rule book, you follow guidelines, protect broad spectrum antimicrobials, and collect samples for culture before starting antibiotics. Very often it is seen that the antibiotics are started and then you draw a sample, you will not grow anything. The susceptibility will be grossly reduced if antibiotics are started. And then another very important intervention is formulary restriction. In this, you categorize the antibiotics into three different categories: excess, watch, and reserve. In the this has been given by WHO. Excess category has these antibiotics, where thereby meaning that we need to increase access to these basic core antibiotics. So whenever a patient needs some infection bacterial, so these should be available. But watch group are antibiotics like piperacillin, imipenem, cilastin, all these and some of these third generation, fourth generation, fifth generation, fourth generation, fifth generation are reserved drugs. So these, because they have a potential for developing resistance, so these watch group and reserve group antibiotics should be used sparingly. So excess, if at all you had to start with some antibiotics, doxycycline or amoxicillin clavulanic acid like augmentin, you can start with that. Cephalexin can be given. These drugs can be given if at all required, but don't jump onto these watch group piperacillin, imipenem, and cefixime, cefotoxime routinely. And reserved drugs, third, fourth generation, azithromycin, daptomycin, all these should be, tigecycline, these should be reserved for ICU critically ill patients only. So we need to carefully decide. Rule book will decide, antibiotic policy will decide, which one will be used empirically, definitive, and which one will be used prophylactically. So, but bottom of this is that we need to identify the infective organism and susceptibility, and it should precede antimicrobial therapy whenever possible. So if I have to summarize this antimicrobial stewardship, reserve antibiotics for serious patients, even in COVID, and microbiological investigation before starting antibiotic, reevaluate daily. This is a good practice, and stop at the earliest. Most often, 5 days treatment is enough. If you have to go beyond 5 days, review the clinical condition and perform this IV to oral switch as early as possible, and choose excess group of antibiotics whenever possible, and use biomarkers for infection whenever needed, and prevent these hospital acquired infections. So just briefly about, I think I have time.
Yes, you have time.
Okay. And another, along with COVID-19, even the second wave was not over. This black fungus problem came to us, and the entire health infrastructure was again crumbled under this. Amphotericin liposomal is not available because earlier mucormycosis was very rare, and these pharmacies used to just stock 5 ampules, and they say even these 5 ampules used to expire because there was no need. But now this opportunistic infections with fungi, with this viral, it has complicated this COVID-19 problem. And influenza could be a very common viral infection. So that is why whenever this is suspected, tests are available for viral infections. So oseltamivir has been recommended. It should be given along with the COVID management. The fungal infections, COVID-19 associated pulmonary aspergillosis, candida, mucormycosis, pneumocystis jirovecii, coccidomycosis, histoplasma. These are all the fungal infections which can occur as a opportunistic infections. And the worst part is that the fungal pneumonia caused by these fungi are they present similar to COVID-19. So it's becoming makes the treatment management even more difficult. But this is when is the time that you look for this is during first or second week of hospitalization is the time when you expect that these fungal infections would be there. Now these fungal infections are more because of the indiscriminate use of antibiotics, There are many theories being propagated, steroid, because it lowers your immunity, high dose steroids, hospitalization, exposure to these in the environment. And some even said nasal hygiene, if it was bad, if people were taking too much of steam, so this also could have led to this mucormycosis, getting into the nasi. So appropriate diagnostic tests should be used. ICMR has come up with the guidelines, so need to follow these guidelines, how to prevent, how to screen, diagnose and manage this mucormycosis, because this is a life threatening. Within 2 to 3 days time, this mucor will become life threatening. So we need to act fast, recognize, screen patients for this, and diagnose and manage them properly. And the risk factors for invasive fungal infections are almost the same. Those who have acute respiratory distress, advanced age, patients with cystic fibrosis, COPD, diabetes, critically ill, admitted in ICU, receiving broad spectrum antibiotics, intensive chemotherapy, on immunosuppressive therapy, on corticosteroid. So these are the patients who are more susceptible to this fungal infection. So if we can control these, so diabetes control is very important, and using this invasive ventilation to the lowest possible, and monitor these patients more closely would be important. Now, another component of this antibiotic stewardship is that we need to educate the others. I said this in relation to the healthcare workers, but we need to educate the public also, because a lot of self medication happened during second wave. To some extent they were justified, because they did not have access to the healthcare system, doctors were not available, they couldn't go out, they didn't know where, so they were sharing their prescriptions amongst themselves. So we had felt this problem was always there. So we were organizing a social education campaign. We organized on the occasion of World Antimicrobial Awareness Week in 2019. So we did this campaign in Delhi schools, and almost 1000 schools participated. Teachers were sensitized on this problem of antibiotic use and resistance. Children were very enthusiastic about this. This year, last year also, we organized a campaign in 2020. The challenge here was everything was in lockdown, no physical meetings were allowed. So we developed this as an online social media campaign. We developed messages, posters for the education of the larger public, and we had these online sessions for the school. This time we had both public sector also participating in this campaign, and a lot of around 3.5 lakhs children were sensitized to this problem. And because this was online, and we not wanted to engage the students more with this problem, as we have seen with firecrackers campaign, it became a success when the children were involved. So we used that same concept here, and we organized an online ideathon. This was a competition, and where children from these schools participated. They made posters, they wrote poems, songs, they made some good films also. So this was again 5000 students participated in this ideathon. So this was I wanted to share with you that public education is equally important, and students are the good to start with the target. Now, before I end, I think I liked this cartoon on I received today on WhatsApp. Although the lockdown is over, it has been relaxed because of other considerations, but the corona has not left us. So it is still there. So we need to focus equally on hygiene and infections. If you don't follow hygiene, if we don't have infection prevention practices measures in place, and we don't follow social distancing, these COVID-19 infection and other bacterial infections will continue to harm us, and we know the impact of this. I have this is my granddaughter here. She goes for a I because of her behavior, it struck me, why should a child, all these practices should be inculcated in children. My granddaughter, every day morning she goes for a small ride before I leave for my hospital, and every day I was finding she used to take my mask and put it over her mouth. Then I said, okay, let me give her a mask. And my it was so, I was so amused to see she did not remove this mask once. Even when she got back home, she did not remove it. So from there I got this idea that if we start educating the children, perhaps a lot of adults will also learn, and children will follow adults, and adults can learn from the children. So this is a very important aspect. If we want to rescue antibiotics, then we need to look at these infection and other matters. And lastly, this is my last slide. Let me tell you, antibiotics are a special class of drugs, and they are called uniquely societal drugs because individual use affects others in the community and environment. Many a times I hear from the clinician, it is my patient, I know what to give, what not to give, and I need to save my patient. Fine, all these things are good, that you need to take care of your patient and you need to save them. But remember, if you use these antibiotics on individuals, but it affects the others also in the community and the environment, it is all over again. So we need to protect these antibiotics use. Even for individuals, should be very very careful, should be calculated properly, when needed, not needed. And I always say, most of us in our training learn about when to use these antibiotics. Even I was for last 1 hour talking about when to use it, but it is equally important to know when not to use antibiotics. And I would wish you all that you all we stay safe, take care, and get well soon without antibiotics. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sharma. The presentation that you gave was really covering all the aspect we could think about the antibiotics, from policy to awareness, from the impact to the pandemic that we might be facing if we get drug resistant. So yeah, and very rightly said, the lockdown might be eased, but we need to inculcate the COVID safety measures among children, because tomorrow when they are going to school, they must be ready to fight COVID equally, like we are doing. So we have some questions by our participants in the Q&A box, and we would like you to address them. I'll just go through them and you can respond to those questions. Okay, so the first one is by Dr. Sangeeta Sharma. Why no pharma company audit for antibiotics production?
Yes, audit is needed at the institutional level. We need to look at what's happening, how and which antibiotics are being used for which indication at the institutional level, at the clinician level, and even at the larger the societal level. Where which antibiotics are being used by which sector. Now with this national action plan, this was in a made in 2017. So there is a provision for this. So implementation of this national action plan on AMR to combat this AMR does talk about this. So I think in near future we will start seeing the company audit for antibiotic productions as well.
Another question by Dr. San.
think,
Okay, I think that's somebody logged in from your ID. So we talk about only the antibody resistance, but there's no alternative to antibiotics. We have been talking and taught so far. It's the antibiotic that is available.
I think in 1 hour's talk, I couldn't cover this, but very pertinent question has been raised. We need to focus on alternatives. I think one of the best time-tested alternative is vaccination. So, we need to expand the spectrum, and we need to expand the coverage. Then second is, prevention, IPC measures. And then there are other probiotics, prebiotics. These have been tried, heavy metal things, bacteriophages. These are, but we don't have a very unequivocal evidence for these. So they have their own limitation. They are still under research study. So large scale availability may be a limitation for some of these. So certainly are this. Maybe one session can be on the alternatives to antibiotics. This is entirely one big full session on this can
Yeah.
be there.
Even I was thinking when you said there's no new class of antibiotic coming up. So what are the alternative? Is it lack of R&D done from our side? Is it market driven?
As I said, antibiotics and pharmaceutical industry is not interested in this. Over the years, this segment has declined, and even expertise is also not readily available for discovery of new antibiotics. We need a lot of funds for this. Public private partnership is needed here, and certainly, as I said, some of these alternatives we need to how to take it to a large scale post marketing stage. All these things are under going at present, but soon we should be having these alternatives available.
Next question by Dr. Babu Ramchandran is, with limited data evidence, how do we measure the requirement of antibiotic, antiviral in management of patients in pandemic situation?
In pandemic, I gave you the reasons, why people were using. I gave you also the global data on this, and our situation was no better than what is available globally. Initially, people thought they are well developed healthcare systems, they shouldn't have much problem, but they are also facing the similar problems which we are facing in India. But although regular updates on the current data publications on this is very much warranted, we need to look at, it will help us in projecting, in which direction are we heading. But certainly we now know that co-infection is not more than 5%. Super infection is around 20%. Maximum, if you can take in your setting, 30%. But antibiotic use is much more than that. So we need to, even without this data, we know that this is a big problem.
Yeah. So next question is, often there's a pressure to prescribe from patients or their attendants, particularly in private sector. Private practice, how should medical practitioners tackle this?
Let us not stigmatize private sector. This happens in public sector as well. The drivers are different in public sector because of high patient load. We have no time to explain to patient, because when you're saying no to antibiotics, you need to explain to the patient why he does not need, and you need time for that. And because of the heavy workload, you don't have time, so as a shortcut, antibiotics are prescribed. Driver in the private sector is revenue and other things, and patients come and demand, because so and so got this, why are you not giving me this? They want to get better, they don't want to be sick for even one day, because nowadays they are working from home, so it doesn't matter. But when they were going to office, they wanted ki aisa quick fix do, okay main kal office chala jaun. Even this was true with us also, कि एक दिन में ठीक होके next day hospital अपना join करेंगे हम. So a lot of things, and doctors use these antibiotics as a defensive practice as well. अगर मैंने नहीं दिया, वो पेशेंट को कुछ हो गया, तो who will be responsible? People will be holding me responsible. So a lot of defensive practice is there. But if you take time to explain to the patient when they need it and when they don't need it, perhaps this problem can be sorted out. Because many times is people take fever as a sign of infection, and all for them all infections are bacterial infections. So but not all fevers are infections, not all infections are bacterial. So we need to recognize that most often these infections are 90% are viral and they don't need antibiotics, but we see a reverse pattern here.
Yeah, so I was going to say about this, like whenever, like even we had some prolonged common cold or flu, the friends, family members, they will first ask us, did you take antibiotic? Did the doctor prescribe you antibiotic? So now we know,
In
like,
my family, I have been working on this rational drug use for now 25 years. तो मुझे बोलते थे कि ये रैशनल यूज ना अपना वहीं पर छोड़ के आया करो, घर पे
antibiotic चाहिए.
एंटीबायोटिक दे दो, जल्दी ठीक हो जाएंगे. बट ओवर द इयर्स दे रियलाइज दे गॉट बेटर विदाउट एंटीबायोटिक्स ऑल्सो. डायरिया सेल्फ लिमिटिंग इलनेस है, 2-3 दिन में डायरिया अपने आप से ठीक हो जाएगा. तो ओवर द इयर्स नाउ दे हैव रियलाइज कि अच्छा करती है, नहीं देती है हमें. तो यू नीड टू हैव सम पेशेंस, एक्सप्लेन टू द पेशेंट, एंड watchful waiting is something which we can adopt. We explain to the patient that these are the danger signs. If you develop these symptoms, come back to me, then I will prescribe you antibiotic. But till then, you watch yourself. And most often in pediatrics, most of people use antibiotics. वो निमोनिया है तो उनको डर लगता है कि ये अपर रेस्पिरेटरी ट्रैक इन्फेक्शन निमोनिया ना बन जाए छोटा बच्चा, क्योंकि it can quickly spread to lower track. But when if you explain it to red flag signs to the mother, कि पसली चले, सांस तेज चले, तुरंत अस्पताल आ जाना या तुरंत हम पे कांटेक्ट करना, ये मेरा इमरजेंसी नंबर है, तो आई थिंक दिस प्रॉब्लम कैन बी सॉर्टेड. देयर आर अदर वेज ऑफ डूइंग इट, because we cannot stop this AMR, but only we can contain it. We can slow down the development, and these are some of these measures.
Next question is how to manage patients' treatment requirement against frequent change of treatment protocols nationally and globally, especially new studies getting published on COVID-19 management globally every day. What proved to be effective yesterday is not same today or tomorrow.
See, COVID-19, we were all in the same
Both, yeah.
boat. We didn't know what to do. So we were in desperation using drugs which are available, hydroxychloroquine, lopinavir aa gaya, फिर favipiravir aa gaya, remdesivir aa gaya. So we were trying to repurpose these drugs which were being used for other purposes. But, it is research, that is why I said is very important. So looking at these data, whether they are helping us or not. Always these, let me tell you, standard treatment guidelines are dynamic documents. They are not static. And particularly in COVID, we didn't know anything. So we are also, everyone, even policymakers are learning as the pandemic is progressing. But I don't think so. There were too many different recommendations coming too often. Last, I think, was in version was in September, and then January WHO came, and now in June ministry has come up, and they have taken off all these ivermectin, this favipiravir, and remdesivir has been limited to only use in certain conditions only. So I think this is a evolving area, and we need to, because if they don't change, then we will curse them and blame them कि ये evidence based नहीं है, they are continuing with the old recommendations. So it is needed. I think we need to bear with this recommendation. But most often, I think the problem is coming when we are relying on the media or when we are relying on the peers. That's where is the problem. If you have a guidance, you follow that, systematically review your cases, then you would know which one is working and which one is not.
Some give multiple antibiotics, both in COVID and non-COVID cases. What are your comments on that?
Oh, a lot of it. Even in diarrhea, I see, एक एंटीबायोटिक से काम चलता है, उसमें 2 देते हैं, 3 देते हैं. Major misuse of antibiotic I have seen in, surgical cases. We all know one single dose of antibiotic prior to incision is enough to take care of this infections, especially if it is a elected surgical case. But if you go to post operative ward, you will find 10 days, 15 days of antibiotic. एक antibiotic नहीं, 2 3. And I was shocked to see, I went for assessments in some of the hospitals. All normal delivery cases, they received Cefixime. उन्होंने एक किट बनाई हुई थी. वो किट में एक पेन किलर था, सेफिक्सिम थी, आई थिंक वन मोर ड्रग वाज देयर. वो किट सबको, वो क्लिनिकल केस शीट में गिव वन किट. I was shocked to see, if it is a normal delivery, you are using all aseptic precautions, you following all IPC measures, you are using sterilized equipment. Why should your patient be having bacterial infection which needs Cefixime? They say all, in the name of poor hygiene. I don't think so. That's the, Cefixime, or for that matter, any antibiotic does not have any prophylactic role.
Yeah, in normal deliveries.
Yes.
Next is, on a policy level, are there any specific tools, guidelines adapted at different continuum of healthcare system? If so, how effectively are these guidelines put in place?
Usually standard treatment guidelines do take into account the facilities available, the type of infrastructure, the personnel available, the medicines which are available. So you always have tiered guidelines that you can use this at a primary level, at a secondary and a tertiary care level. These are available, but in COVID-19, I think they have not gone down to making it tiered, but they say mild can be treated at isolation facilities or primary centers. Moderate and severe need to be hospitalized, and hospitalization is restricted to COVID facilities. So you can take it as they have tiered it according to the severity of the disease.
Why in this wave post-COVID deaths are more?
I think the super spreader was one thing, the variant which was there. So it was a super spreader, and we were not ready to take up so much of load of these patients. They in fact, after the first day wave, things improved. The daily count came down. Some of these COVID facilities which were developed for pandemic were dismantled. So we were not ready. So perhaps there was something wrong with the projections in making what do you say कि क्या होने वाला है या क्या हो सकता है. So there was something, and super spreader was one thing. And then most of these deaths happened because of the oxygen requirement, because oxygen was not available.
In COVID era, antibiotic became over-the-counter drug. People were buying it on WhatsApp forwards. How do we stop it?
That's where I said community education. That's where you need to educate community that don't ask for it. At the over the counter. This is वो शॉर्टकट की तरह यूज करते हैं कि डॉक्टर के पास ना जाना पड़े, तो फार्मेसिस्ट के साथ ज्यादा कंफर्टेबल महसूस करते हैं और उससे ले लेते हैं. फार्मेसिस्ट को भी कुछ नहीं मालूम है, उसको भी जो बड़ा सेलिंग प्रोडक्ट है वो दे देता है. एंड मेनी टाइम्स वी आल्सो हैव दिस प्रॉब्लम ऑफ इनफॉर्मल प्रेस्क्राइबर्स. अच्छा, उसको भी छोड़ दो अगर एक तरफ, तो अगर एक सीनियर डॉक्टर, रिनाउंड डॉक्टर ने, वेल नोन डॉक्टर ने कुछ गलत लिख दिया है, तो उसकी कॉपी बहुत होती है हमारे यहाँ पर इंडिया में. उसकी प्रेस्क्रिप्शन, अरे वो सो एंड सो फ्रॉम एम, सो एंड सो फ्रॉम दिस हॉस्पिटल, उसने ये लिखा था तो मस्ट बी वेरी गुड. सो पीपल स्टार्ट कॉपीइंग. सो दैट्स अ बिग प्रॉब्लम. सो वी नीड टू एंगेज फार्मासिस्ट एज वेल. सो इट्स नॉट ओनली कि डॉक्टर को एजुकेट कर देंगे, नर्स को कर देंगे, फार्मासिस्ट को भी एंगेज करना है, एंड कम्युनिटी पब्लिक ऑल्सो नीड टू बी एंगेज. सो वी नीड टू फॉलो a multi-pronged approach. So I think we
Yeah,
should keep our efforts on.
completely agree. It's not like one person educated and it will stop. It has to be from
It is
everywhere.
a multi-stakeholder, multi-dimensional problem. When I say multi-stakeholder, तो हम लोग डॉक्टर, ये प्रोफेशनल्स, मैनेजर्स, गवर्नमेंट, फार्मास्यूटिकल इंडस्ट्री आता है. तो it is not only human health. I started my lecture with it that these antibiotics are not only used in human beings, they are also used in animals. So animal का sector, animal husbandry, अब मीट की रिक्वायरमेंट इतनी ज्यादा बढ़ गई है, तो उसकी वजह से इंटेंसिव फार्मिंग हो रही है. इंटेंसिव फार्मिंग में दे आर यूजिंग दीज एंटीबायोटिक्स एज ग्रोथ प्रोमोटर्स. आप इंडिया इज द फोर्थ लार्जेस्ट कंज्यूमर ऑफ एंटीबायोटिक लेज चिकन, because they are all fed with these antibiotics to promote, to increase their weight in short time. So it is not only one sector or one stakeholder which can control this, also multidimensional. Diagnostic test, रेगुलेटरी इशू है, गुड क्वालिटी नहीं है, सम पीपल यूज इट कि वो अच्छी क्वालिटी के एंटीबायोटिक नहीं है, बिहेवियरल इशू है. मेनी ऑफ द रीजंस व्हिच आई मेंशन आर बिहेवियरल. जस्ट बिकॉज वी हैव लर्नड दिस वे. डायरिया है तो एक स्टीरियोटाइप प्रेस्क्रिप्शन मिलेगी आपको, सिप्रोफ्लॉक्सासिन विद tinidazole, ofloxacin with ornidazole. Whereas we know this, time and again we know this, 90% is viral. And co-infection, bacillary dysentery and amoebic dysentery don't happen so often. पर आप प्रेस्क्रिप्शन देखेंगे 90% को ये कॉम्बिनेशन मिल रहा है. तो आई थिंक एजुकेशन इज वेरी इम्पोर्टेंट.
Last question. Is there any portal for it to learn more about antimicrobial resistance, WHO site or any
Yes,
other site you recommend?
There is, and WHO also has uploaded various courses on this. AMR, there is a course available. This is free. Anyone can register for this open courses, WHO. So if you type that on the internet, you will find this lot of these programs are there. They have even programs for IPC, AMR. So I think they have a very good repository of information on AMR and antibiotics.
One last question, which is posted in the chat box, not in the Q&A box, but please take that also. At primary level, we are working in remote areas where diagnostic measures are not available. How should we judge whether to use antibiotic?
I know that's the limitation at primary care level, but then clinical features, I would say, we need to be very proficient in distinguishing it from viral infection is clinical feature. But over the years, we've relied more on the laboratory diagnostics. I would say, for example, if somebody is having a sore throat, upper respiratory tract infection, 90% is again viral. 10 to 15% go on developing the super infection. But when you after watchful waiting, a patient develops super infection, if you what all super infection can happen. The infection can go to the ear, infection can go to the sinus, infection can become streptococcal, staphylococcal, pus point will be there. So all these things can be made out clinically. If there is ear infection, there will be earache, there will be discharge from the ear. So you need to give antibiotic. When there is a sinusitis, there will be a post-nasal drop, drip would be there. So that this is sinusitis. And when it is sore throat, pus points, distinct pus points are there. But what happens is, over the years, we don't touch even patients. अभी कोविड टाइम में तो बिल्कुल ही बंद हो गया, पर पहले भी मैंने देखा कि पेशेंट चल के आ रहा है, अभी आपके पास बैठा नहीं है, उसने अपनी पूरी प्रॉब्लम नहीं बताई, एंड वी राइट ए प्रिस्क्रिप्शन फॉर हिम. सो नो टच टेक्नोलॉजी पहले भी होती थी, अब तो खैर नीड ऑफ द आवर हो गई है. बट सर्टेनली यू कैन, बेसिलरी डाइसेंट्री है, ब्लड इन स्टूल इज डायग्नोस्टिक. तो देर आर निमोनिया हो गया है तो पता है कि सांस तेज चल रही है, यू नो द काउंट्स फॉर वेरियस एज ग्रुप, यू नो कि पसली चलेगा, उसका रिसेशन होगा. So many of these things can be made out this thing, but if available, these laboratories should be utilized, especially for COVID. We need to do this, and if you think that the patient is having, you're free to refer to a higher level. You should know the danger signs. I think one message I would like to give for people at PHC level is आपको अपनी लिमिट पता होना चाहिए कि मैं यहाँ तक इसको ऐसे ट्रीट कर सकती हूँ. अगर ये फाइंडिंग है तो I need to refer this patient to a higher level. Don't hold these patients with you unnecessarily for a longer time.
True. Thank you so much. Thanks. With this, we come towards the end of the session. Any closing remarks, Dr. Sharma, from your side?
Take home messages that these are precious medicines and life-saving medicines. So we need to use them, handle them with care. This resistance problem is a biological phenomena. We cannot stop it. All we can do is slow down this and preserve the existing antibiotics. Whatever we have, and we can easily do it by a judicious use of antibiotics, and use more of clinical features and other things, to evaluate the patient, whether, rather than using this empirically, just in case हाँ इसमें ये होगा तो मैं दे देंगे. Just in case, antibiotics should be avoided. Excess is also important. I think we need to, we see many patients dying because usko simple amoxicillin nahi mila. Pneumonia ka patient tha. I did one study in slums and we gave simple amoxicillin to them. Pneumonia got better, cured. So abhi log sochte hain ki higher or the expensive is the better. No, that is not the case. Even simple antibiotics can work. We should use them judiciously.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Sharma, for helping us understand the details of antibiotics, its misuse in general situation and in COVID. This was really very helpful and very informative. So, like now we know antibiotics aren't always the answer when we are sick. It is very important to know when to use it. So I would like to thank you, Dr. Sharma, for giving your precious time and delivering this talk today. I would also like to thank SBI Foundation for supporting us in convening these educational series. For our participants, your feedback is very important. There is a feedback link in the chat box posted by my colleague Paramita. Kindly click on that and let us know how the session was and how we can improve further. Coming towards our next session of the series is scheduled on Friday, June 18th at 6 p.m. by Dr. Colonel Rakesh Verma, who will be talking on operating healthcare facilities during pandemic and beyond. Don't forget to register yourself for the upcoming sessions. Thank you all for your participations and patience. Have a wonderful evening. Stay safe. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Sharma.
Thank you, Deepa.
Thank you so much. Thank you.